Welcome to tonight's debate between the two candidates for mayor here in the city of Attleboro, sponsored by the Sun Chronicle. Tonight's debate is being televised live by AACS, and the audio of this evening's debate can be heard live on WARA radio. My name is Peter Gay. I am a lifelong resident here in the city of Attleboro and a long-time voter. Like many of you this evening, I will be listening very closely to the two candidates before I head to the polls on November 7th. Those candidates are, to my immediate left, the challenger state representative, Paul Heroux, and to my far left, the incumbent mayor, Kevin Dumas. In addition to answering questions from each other, the two will answer questions from our three panelists. To my immediate right, Sun Chronicle columnist Bill Gouveia, Sun Chronicle reporter Jim Hand, and former Sun Chronicle editor and now columnist and golf writer Mike Kirby. Save the best for last. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to make a request for those of you joining us here at City Hall, and for those of you watching on TV, this room is absolutely packed. Please silence your cell phones, and remember, this room reminds me a little bit of a fireplace where, well, the firefighters can certainly attest to this. The oxygen feeds into the fireplace. Well, here the sound from the back of the room feeds to the front of the room. It is very distracting when people are talking in the background, especially to the candidate that you may be supporting. So I ask you, if you do have to take a phone call or you want to talk to someone, please go either outside. That's the timer. That's the timer. We're just testing it. Also, please, and you've been very good so far, please refrain from clapping. Once again, that is very distracting to the candidates, and it also robs the next candidate of some of their allotted time. To the candidates, let me begin by saying I know both of you. I have the utmost respect for the two of you, and ask that you don't put me in the difficult position of having to interrupt you if you speak beyond the allotted time. That's a nice way of saying keep an eye on Mr. Borges. So please keep an eye on those cues. Let's begin. We had a drawing moments ago. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to make an opening statement. We had that drawing, and Paul Heroux will begin.
Very good. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? I'm back. I tend to speak very softly. So my name is Paul Heroux, and I'm the state representative, and I'm seeking the position of being your next mayor. First, I'd like to thank the Sun Chronicle and for hosting this event. I'd like to thank Mayor Dumas for his participation in the service over the last 14 years. There's a number of people in the audience who are elected officials, and I'd like to thank them for their service, and the firefighters in the back. Thank you for all of your service as well. I never thought I'd be running for mayor. It was not exactly how I envisioned my career going. I thought I'd be running for state senate next, or U.S. rep, or going back and finishing my PhD. But a lot of parents were legitimately concerned about the quality of their kids' education. Not just parents, teachers as well. A lot of people started asking me to think about running, and so I thought about it for a long time. But you can't run on just one issue. It's not just about education. It's about running an entire city. And there's a bunch of things that I want to do differently than have been done differently in the last several years. If we look at the business climate, for example, we have a Chamber of Commerce that's a great resource to find out what's going wrong with the business climate in Attleboro. I have an excellent relationship with the Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to use them as a resource to work better to improve the business climate here in Attleboro. I'd like to hire an economic development director. That's someone who actually would bring businesses back to Attleboro. I'd like to create a disability commission, something that was disbanded over the last several years. I'd also like to create a commission on the charter commission. That way we can find out if the citizens really do want term limits or not, because I believe strongly in term limits for the executive branches. So I have 10 seconds to go. I'm looking forward to a fun debate. I'll stop here, and hopefully you guys like what I have to say tonight. Thank you.
Mayor Dumas, you also have 2 minutes.
Good evening, and thank you to those who are in attendance this evening, and also for those who are certainly viewing from home. I am Kevin Dumas, and I'm seeking re-election for the office of mayor. Let me tell you why I'm running. I'm committed, I'm dedicated. No one asked me to run, but because I love Attleboro. And I'm proud of the many accomplishments that have been made by the team that have really changed the face of Attleboro. And certainly over the last 14 years, we've made great progress. There's always more to do, there's always more to improve upon, and there's certainly to achieve our future goals. Strong financial stability is paramount into how our achievements were made. And it's important to have a steady hand on the city's finances to produce those solid results continuously. Our bond rating, which is our credit rating, has been raised twice during my administration, and I promise to continue to make those good, sound, fine fiscal decisions. Recently, we released a 5-year sustainability plan that we're ready to begin implementation on July 1st. This lays the path forward for our schools, as well as a path forward for all of our city departments, with realistic revenues being matched by realistic expenses and a planned approach together. We've been working hard on all areas of government for you. We have great schools, and we're actually achieving great education and goals for our kids. We have cutting edge on public safety services where police are using technology to be able to solve crime and also being in the service of being able to help with battling the opioid epidemic. And our fire department is delivering paramedicine that's saving lives and certainly being recognized by top area hospitals. We have beautiful park and recreational facilities that are second to none. We have a state-of-the-art animal shelter and many other services that we bring to you, our residents. I promise to continue the great services that you've come to know and expect from us and remain open certainly to all of our constituents' needs. Attleboro has in fact changed greatly over the past 14 years. I'm honored to serve in that capacity and certainly ask in the remaining time to be able to ask for your vote on November 7th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Candidates will now answer questions from our 3 panelists. The question is directed to will have 2 minutes and 30 seconds to answer, while the other candidate will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. The first question will be asked by Bill Gouveia. It will be asked to Representative Hiru.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. Representative, both candidates have talked a lot during the campaign about funding education, funding the school budget, and there's been tremendous pressure from the public to do that. The question is, how will you manage that in the future? If significantly more money is allocated to education, won't that mean serious reduction in other areas or greatly increased revenues? Please tell us what areas you would look to cut to accomplish that, or what revenues you would look to increase to accomplish that.
This is sort of a softball question. Thank you for this.
I can pick a harder one if you like.
So, you know, the 7 of the last 14 years, school spending was below the state requirement. And I believe that's because the mayor funded it just at the state requirement. And that's data that's obtainable. You can get that from the Department of Education in the state. What the mayor just talked about a moment ago was a plan that he has for education that is based on contract negotiations with unions that have not happened yet. It's based on a millionaire's tax that is opposed by the governor. It is based on legislation that I co-sponsored that hasn't been voted on yet. Quite frankly, the education plan that the financing plan that he put forward its foundation is based on sand. It's a whole bunch of what ifs. What I would like to do is use several different resources. You know, one of the things is we have the marijuana industry coming into Attleboro. That's supposed to bring in an extra $1 to $3 million a year. That's a great place we can get extra revenues for schools without dipping into any other city agency at the time. Another thing is that the mayor, over the last year or two, has given a lot more money to education, a lot more than he has historically given. That's because of pressure, not priority. What we've seen is that the money that's coming in, allegedly, supposedly is not, coming to schools, is supposedly not coming in at a cost to any other city departments. So the fact that he gave over $2 million extra this year and $2 million over last year, my question is, why haven't you been doing that all along? Another place we can get money is fewer lawsuits. If we settle before things ever go to court all the way, or before we go to arbitration, settle way before. One city councilor estimated it's been upwards of $10 million we've lost in lawsuits. Another place we could do it is, maybe not having one extra car on the road that we don't need. There's a lot of places that we could get extra money. I'm looking forward to hearing Mr. Dumas' response.
Mayor Dumas, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Gouveia. And certainly, as part of the 5-year sustainability plan that is outlined and is online, you can certainly see that it takes into account the fact of the continued progress that we've made with funding. One of the things that starts in fiscal 2019, we've already committed, and which we started in 2011, which is $1 million over the minimum net school spending requirement, and that's when we dictated that there was really a problem that started with Chapter 70 allocations when we enacted the meals tax. Not only have we kept that commitment, we then agreed to do 50% of the increase in the tax levy every year moving forward as long as I'm here. That's noted into the plan, and of course that grows every year. In addition, for fiscal 2019, there's an additional $750,000 on top of what we've already done. So right now we're $2.5 million, which has been climbing every year in our education appropriation above the minimum state requirement, and now we'll be going another $750,000 on top of that, plus the increase in the levy dollars, in order to be able to fund that first year. And where that's coming from, is outlined in the plan, is we actually have debt service that's falling off from the school department, and so the last middle school payment is actually in this current fiscal year. And as part of that commitment moving forward, we've allocated those dollars in the proposed budget for next year to go towards education towards the first year of implementation.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Jim Hand. It will be addressed to Mayor Dumas.
Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
I hope this won't be too much of a softball question. A year ago last spring, the school department announced 65 layoffs, sent out pink slips to teachers. Then you worked to get them extra money, and they reduced the number of layoffs to something like 35. My question is, why didn't you do that at the beginning rather than put the city through the turmoil of petitions and protest and anxiety over layoffs?
So in order to be able to go and plan accordingly, people have their base budgets of which they're known. And so that's what was originally submitted as the base budget as it was put into the system as we required for what we absolutely have to fund. Based upon that, that's where all the budget discussions actually started. And based upon that original discussion, and it's very, very early in the process, decisions were made that that's where we were going to be as part of the budgetary process of the 2 fiscal years ago, fiscal 2017. As we made our way, it's a long process. It starts sometimes 6 months in advance before the actual budget gets voted by the municipal council. And there are lots of moving parts and things that had to be done as a part of that. And one of the things that we did is that we came to the table and actually made city reductions as it related to services and people and the other 23 city departments in order to be able to try and aid as much as possible in that reduction. And in the end, it ended up being in a position where there are very few reductions overall, and most of that staff has been brought back.
Representative Haru, you have 90 seconds.
Very good. In 2011, Mayor Dumas was in a debate with Mr. Churchill at Aguda Sakim, and he prided himself on the city being fiscally sound, and evidence of that was that we did not have to lose any city employees. We lost over 30 teachers. We lost 10 city employees here in City Hall. I wonder if he still thinks that what he's doing is fiscally sound. The first time I was ever contacted by the mayor about education financing troubles was in May of 2016. It was last year. Never before had he ever reached out to his state representative, even after I had a long track record of successes at the State House. And when I came here to City Hall, I'm actually so glad that you reported on this in a column recently, Jim. When I came here to City Hall, I met upstairs in the conference room, and the mayor came in. The first thing he said was, "Thank you all for meeting with me." He sat down, he said, "For the first time in 13 years, my ass is on the line." And for the next hour, it was all about bailing him out. And this was May 9th, 2016. The same day, 83 pink slips went out. He was worried about his ass being on the line. I'm sorry. You lost all confidence in me when you said that. And I thought it was always going to be my word against yours when that was in the paper. I'm sorry, when that happened. But when I saw Jim Hand had said 2 other people said that to him, I said, wow, that's incredible.
The next question will be asked by Mike Kirby. It will be addressed to Representative Hugh.
Representative, a second marijuana facility has been proposed in Attleboro. The first facility plans to have a retail shop. Are you in favor or against selling recreational marijuana in Attleboro?
Yeah, I'm in favor of it. I mean, I personally don't smoke. I never have. I hate the smell of it. I hate the way people act when they're on it around me. But the citizens of Attleboro voted 57% in the ballot question to allow, legalization of recreational marijuana. The revenues that we can achieve through recreational marijuana and medicinal marijuana are, quite substantial. We worked on this at the State House with legislation that we passed recently to keep it so that no municipality that has voted in favor of it as a majority is able to keep out of that municipality like a recreational marijuana facility. I know there's new business in council talking about delaying it so that some regulations can be put down. I would urge, the council caution that this doesn't lead to another lawsuit, because if they try and delay it too long, recreational marijuana companies may try and come after us saying you're delaying it or you're trying to keep us out when there is no legal basis to do that. It's, like I said, the industry is something I would use to, partly fund education, because that money should be put to the best possible use, and I believe that's probably the best possible use.
Mayor Dumas, you have 90 seconds.
So, Mike, I am not against it, and certainly the voters have made their notions known. The City Council has stepped up at the advice of the City Solicitor to be able to make sure that they can at least put the rules and regulations as they did for the first round of what they approved. They'll be doing that in the second round, from what I'm told, and they'll be taking the responsible approach, and certainly I don't think they're looking to enter into any type of a lawsuit.
The next question will be asked by Bill Gouveia. It will be addressed to Mayor Dumas.
Mayor Dumas, at the risk of now switching from apparently softball to hardball, the candidates themselves have been relatively quiet during most of the campaign, although undoubtedly working very hard. Yet the unmistakable buzz is that behind the scenes, this has been a particularly vicious and dirty campaign. Is that an accurate portrayal? And if so, how and why?
I wouldn't say downright dirty and vicious. I would say that certainly there's discussion, no matter what side you're on, about your opponent's strengths and weaknesses and such. But I can't say that from my campaign, and I've said this to Jim, I've said this to George Rhodes and everybody else, especially as any member of my campaign team, that we've been keeping it positive all along.
You have 90 seconds to respond.
I've been trying to ignore him. Quite frankly, I mean, I've wanted to go door to door and just quietly go about my business, knocking on doors, talking to voters, one person at a time. And I've had a very good response doing that. I've had a lot of people tell me they're going to vote for me. Some people undecided. Some people tell me flat out they're not going to. And I've enjoyed that, though. Going door to door is a great way to get a sense of what's going on in the community. Last year, when I was running for re-election unopposed for state rep, I didn't have an opponent, but I still went around and knocked on doors. I never tell people how many doors I knock on, because I don't want anybody to try and knock on that many plus one. But I don't think it has been a particularly vicious, campaign cycle. I mean, there was somebody tried to humiliate me and an ex-girlfriend by releasing a private message that I had sent to her, which is something I had said in, my campaign announcement when I was announcing. There was a situation I had 8.5 years ago that somebody on Kevin's campaign team had told me about, that he was going to release the day before. So you have somebody who's defecting, and
That's not true.
Yeah, they but they had told me about this, and so I released that information first. But it hasn't been I think it's actually been a very quiet campaign, for the most part.
The next question will be asked by Jim Hand. It will be addressed to Representative Hero.
Representative, several years ago, I think it was your family sold a building downtown, and 2 restaurants were attracted by the city, and it looked like maybe the downtown section, not the new project, but the old downtown, was maybe making a comeback, and it appears to have stalled out. There's no progress since then. But And it's an old problem. What would you do as mayor to get some activity downtown and to get some more businesses downtown?
Well, thank you for that question. The building you're talking about is the Ashley Building, where Park Street Ale and Brewhouse and Sangria's is located. In 2009, much to the credit of the mayor and his team, they found a buyer for my mother, and I negotiated that deal for $350,000 with John Dascom. And let's talk about the 2011 election, because Ron Churchill back then had said that there were 22 or 23 vacancies downtown. Just a few months ago, Jose Lemus was saying the exact same thing 6 years later. So not much has actually changed. So what we're doing is not working. What I would do different is I would, first of all, work with the Chamber of Commerce. Like I said before, they're a great resource. They have a good sense of what's going on with the business community, what the challenges are. That's one thing I'd want to do. I'd want to hire an economic development director, somebody who's actually going to recruit businesses to come back to Attleboro. I'd also want to work with the Chamber of Commerce on their, to expand their downtown business association. That needs to grow a lot as well. I'd also work more collaboratively with the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority. They can do things that the city can't do. It's kind of an unfortunate situation. The incumbent has taken a lot of credit for projects he had absolutely nothing to do with, that the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority had everything to do with. So I would do things a lot differently. It's more of an interactive approach. It's more working with people, working with different organizations, rather than trying to, and to the mayor's credit, and I've said this many times knocking on doors, to the mayor's credit, he's done a nice job getting state and federal grants to make the sidewalks and lampposts look nice, and it does look nice. He brought us this far. I'd like to bring us this far. I'd like to, work off of what he has done, but what he has done isn't working. The business tax classification, the percent of businesses in Attleboro is actually, as a value, is decreasing. Right now, I think it's about 82.2% of all the property value in Attleboro is residential, but that's actually expected to go up to 83% and 84%. So the value of our businesses is actually decreasing. Like I said, what we're doing is not working.
Mayor Dumas, you have 90 seconds to respond.
Thanks, Jim. One of the things that is part of our goals for redevelopment is actually, I'm glad that you brought this up, is this portion of Union Street from the old Kidstown, right outside here on Union Street, down to the corner and right up to the Ashley Building. It's actually one property owner that owns the whole thing. And the city has approached that person in order to be able to start talks, to be able to start our next round of urban renewal, which will be that section that I just referenced. In addition to that, we would also like to add an additional parcel, which is right across from your building on South Main Street, the Canada Building, in order to be able to do the same type of redevelopment that we're doing down at the Transit-Oriented Development District, would be something that we can bring down to these two sectors that terribly need that urban renewal.
The next question will be asked by Mike Kirby. It will be addressed to Mayor Dumas. Mike?
Mayor, the big issue in the city is the proposed construction of a new Attleboro High School at an estimated cost of about $250 million. What is your response if taxpayers say the cost has to come down to under $200 million? What could be paid from the plans?
I can tell you right now, from working very closely with the school building committee and of course with the Mass School Building Authority, that's a process of which we go through on all school building projects. And this is not a Taj Mahal. This is it's a comprehensive high school, all Chapter 74 programs, and what it really takes to be able to provide 21st century education. So there are not all these extra bells and whistles that are included as part of this high school project. This is the cost of what the needs have been identified of the staff and for the district for the education plan, that is the school departments. So it's nothing extra, no giant bells and whistles that can be cut from the project. The estimated cost for the project is over $263 million. And the state is expected to cover about half of that, which is fantastic, maybe a little bit more than that, but that is the price. So there isn't a plan B as it relates to the fact that if this doesn't pass, we have an issue. We have an aging facility that was originally built in 1960-61, with the addition that went on to the 70s. You have major system systems, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, that are failing. They're encased in concrete in the floor. We can't get at them. And in order to avoid some type of a full system failure and not being able to have a place to put a couple thousand people to provide education, we would have an issue. So we want to be as responsible with the plan as we can, keeping in mind the cost of the project, and in order to truly educate all sectors of the community in order to build enough support of the project that we can have that pass in 2018.
Representative, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. The incumbent did not answer the question. He didn't say what would happen or what would need to happen if the first proposal fails. I've actually gotten myself into a little bit of trouble talking about this issue because of what I've heard knocking on the doors, and I say, don't shoot the messenger. I also support that we get a new high school. I believe the mayor and I are on the same page. The sooner we get it, the better off we are. But I have heard from a lot of people that a lot of people are not going to vote for it. So, if you think about what we'd have to do, why would people not vote for it? Let's just think this through logically. And again, don't shoot the messenger. I do support a new high school. If it doesn't pass, why didn't it pass? Now, my experience knocking on doors, people are saying that they all agree that we need a new high school. There's pretty much everybody agrees that. But we are a gateway city. We're not a rich community. A lot of people can't afford it. We have to find ways to make sure they can't afford it, and I believe the mayor, to his credit, is actually working on that right now. But if it doesn't pass, that's your question. What do we do? First thing we have to do is work to fix the immediate problems we have with the current high school. That would involve me working with the school administration to figure out what that is and triage those projects. The next thing we have to do is work to find out this is where I get myself in trouble. We have to propose a more modest high school because we couldn't possibly propose the same high school again, otherwise we're going to get the same or a worse result because of inflation. So we'd have to propose a smaller, more modest high school, and then what we'd have to do next is get back in the MSBA, and there is no line, it's all need-based, and the need is great, so I believe we would be able to get state funding again quite quickly.
Thank you. Thank you, panelists. The questions in this debate will now be asked by the candidates themselves. Candidates will have 30 seconds to ask their question. The candidate answering that question will have 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and the candidate who originally asked the question will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to respond. Now that you are totally confused, that's why I keep track of these things. The first question will be asked by Mayor Dumas to Representative Hero.
Sure, we touched on this a little bit earlier tonight, but Mr. Hero, on your website you have one sentence that says, "I will end the pattern of education appropriations that's centered around the minimum state requirement, unless a crisis occurs, and replace it with a consistent amount of funding significantly above net school spending that the school system can depend to improve education." I've laid out my 5-year, 15-page plan that was directed and be able to be worked with Director of Budget, the Superintendent of Schools, and the Chairman of the School Committee that helps bridge the school needs at a great rate of over $3.2 million above net school spending, specifically for fiscal 2019 in year 1. So right here, right now, what are the details specifically of your plan, and how much, and where is the revenue actually coming from under your plan?
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. 14 years after you took office, 16 months after we laid off 30 teachers, 3 weeks before an election, you finally released an education plan. Are you kidding me? So your plan, as I indicated before, is based on contract negotiations with the unions that would affect all city employees that have not happened, and they've said is not going to happen. It's based on legislation that hasn't passed, and it's based on a millionaire tax that the governor won't sign into law if it does pass. We'd have to override that in the legislature. My plan, as I've said, is that, the revenues are there. We have a $128 million budget. You've shown that the revenues are there as of recent, but the data that I got from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education shows that 7 out of 14 years, the schools were spending below what they were supposed to. That's DESE data. I mean, that's not up for debate. The place that I would get it, like I said, $1 to $3 million coming from the marijuana industry coming to Attleboro. I'll also, give 50% of whatever the new tax levy is. Just, you've said 50%. I'll give more than 50%. So if the school budget is 56% that year, that's what the schools are going to get that year, 56%. If it's 53%, I'll give 53%. What you've said is you'll give 50%. Another place that the schools can get some more money is the Medicaid reimbursements that the schools should be getting, but the city takes a lot of that money. There's a couple other places we can get money as well. We can get money through fewer lawsuits. I mentioned that. There's been, like I said, there's one city council estimated about $10 million in lawsuits. There's no transparency with that under me. There will be transparency about where money is going. But there's also the issue of, your salary. Your salary is quite high. That's one place. If we dropped the salary from the $122,000 you're getting right now down to, 100 or 95, whatever it would be, that's $30,000. We could use that, to buy Google Chrome notebooks, or the, extra vehicle that you use, for personal use as well. That's another expense we don't have to spend every couple of years. That could be, a lot more books that we have in the classroom. There are so many places that we could actually get more money from that we're currently not doing right now. So I was actually really curious to see what your first question was going to be, and that was kind of one I expected.
Mayor Dumas, you have 90 seconds.
We're talking about $128 million in a budget that's transparent, that we give council updates quarterly. We go through a budget process annually. We show exactly where the dollars are, what we have available, where the money comes from. So if you have a tax levy of an increase of only $1.6 million for every single city department, it'd be very interesting to see a Paul Heroux budget, because that doesn't make sense of how you're going to balance the needs of all 24 city departments, number one. Number two, it's unfortunate that we go through and telling the public and campaigning about what the statement says on your website and what you've been telling people. So without a plan and without the proper understanding of the budget and the dollars in recurring revenue, it's certainly apparent that a problematic budget would be under Paul Heroux.
The next question will be asked by Representative Hero. Paul told me he's heard every pronunciation going, so
As you
I'm
wish.
doing my best. To the mayor.
Very good. So I'd like to talk about the Mike Malinowski case, because I've mentioned that a couple of times. And that's a situation where, and I'm sure you anticipated this, that's a situation where in the Civil Service Commission's decision, it was said that you acted in bad faith and unlawfully in trying to terminate a person who was not under your chain of command. He reported to the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority. That person, Mike Malinowski, was, essentially pushed out. You created a new ARA board. That resulted in us losing about $800,000 of taxpayer money. What would you have done different?
I will tell you that, first of all, under the civil service case against the prior employees of the Redevelopment Authority, it was very, very clear that, one, the fact was the ARA had gone insolvent, and the city was on the verge of losing all of the dollars, state, federal, and local dollars that was put into that project. And all of the other federal and state partners pulled out. The city of Attleboro, in its bond that it put up for $2.434 million as part of that project, was the last person to pull out, Mr. Heroux, not the first person to pull out. And so the mayor doesn't control the federal or state government as it relates to partners not getting to what they need out of the project. They pulled out, we pulled out last. So that's fact, and that's very important to note to the public, and as previously stated through the newspaper articles throughout that civil service case. But I can tell you that throughout the whole process, it was about the fact that you had an insolvent agency and that millions and millions of dollars that were poured into it, state, local, and federal, were going to be lost. You had an industrial business park that was ready to be foreclosed on by Bristol County Savings Bank, and the whole house of cards began to crumble where they couldn't even pay payroll. So that was the demise of the original Redevelopment Authority, and luckily with a cohesive effort with people coming together, we were able to rebuild that, get the project back on track, and to be able to see what's happening down at the TOD district now. Otherwise, that would have all been gone and had nothing to do with Kevin Dumas.
Representative, you have 90 seconds.
So what I just heard is he wouldn't have done anything differently. The mayor wouldn't have done anything differently. But if I read from the Civil Service Commission, Mayor Dumas also worked in tandem with members of the Municipal Council to exert political pressure upon both the ARA's Board of Directors and Malinowski. Page 85. Continuing, Mayor Dumas's public and private efforts to exert political pressure upon the ARA reveal that Mayor Dumas had a predetermined plan that was designed to remove Malinowski from all his position at all costs. The decision, page 88, the decision to abolish the positions at the ARA had already been unlawfully predetermined by the mayor, unlawfully predetermined. Mr. Mayor, all the problems you identified are true, but that doesn't mean you get to break the law to try and resolve those problems.
The next question will be asked by the mayor to the representative.
Sure. Mr. Haro, you've been serving in office for 5 years in the majority party during that time and brought home $76,000 in a technology grant, of which we had to match $114,000. Since my time in office, I've been able to bring home $16 million in grants to Attleboro. Can you explain the difference?
Yes, the difference between the legislative branch and the executive branch. Not only did I bring home $76,000, which, by the way, you had to apply for twice, and that was my grant program that you never included me in the application of, but, you know, I thought it was funny that you actually said I had no education accomplishments because you applied for a grant program that I created. You also were a member of the Foundation Budget Review Commission, which was a commission created by legislation that I co-sponsored. I also brought to Attleboro money for Horizons for Homeless Children. I brought, to Attleboro, I would like to say, in conjunction with the other legislators, because I advocated for this last year, that we use the state Senate's Chapter 70 money amount as opposed to the House's. That resulted in an extra $200,000 coming to Attleboro. But, there's actually quite a few things I've done, several of which you benefited from because of what I did. Like I said, you applied for a grant program I created. You were on a foundation that I co-sponsored. But what's the difference? Why did you apply? I don't have the constitutional authority to apply for grants as a state representative. That's your job. I mean, it's kind of a funny question that you would ask me that. I mean, I don't know what the gotcha is that you're about to throw at me, but the fact that I got a $38 million bond authorization had never, ever been done in the history of Massachusetts freshmen. I was a freshman. I got $38 million set aside for school internet infrastructure. That had never been done. A magnitude of that amount had never been done. To answer your question, why did I only bring $76,000 is actually not true. I mean, you applied for that grant. I don't have the constitutional authority to apply for grants. You do. That's a big difference.
Mayor, you have 90 seconds.
I think it's also important that as Attleboro State Representative that you do have the ability with working with relations, if you have them, to be able to sponsor a bill or sponsor specific earmarks that could benefit Attleboro and its projects. So certainly that I do believe it's strong and important to have relations of all levels of government, and certainly that we have that under the Dumas administration. And it's also by having the right temperament and being successful as a local government leader. And I've been proud certainly to serve not only on the Foundation Budget Review Commission, but on many other different boards and commissions that certainly have provided many opportunities for Attleboro.
The final question of tonight's debate will be asked by the representative to the mayor.
Thank you. You did serve on the foundation budget, but you also attended less than half of those meetings, just to be clear. The question I have for you is, in May of 2016, when you were at Studley Elementary School, I was in Colorado, but I was Skyped in to participate in that PTO meeting. I'm sure you remember that. And Lucy Pacheco, a parent, asked you about why you keep saying that the state needs to adjust the foundation budget formula. And she said, well, because if this, as I told her, if the state adjusts the formula, then the state's going to be on the hook to pay more money, but so too is the city. And with a roughly 50-50 match, whatever the state has to chip in extra, so too does the city. Why did you say that never came up in the Foundation Budget Review Commission?
I said I did not know the specific dollar amount of what would be required of the city of Attleboro to be able to kick in extra, and if and how much. There are many different factors that go into the amount of Chapter 70 and the different types of things that are the demographics, the different types of makeup, and the other things that happen in Chapter 70. So to come up with a specific dollar amount or exactly how much was going to have to be required, that wasn't known then, and it certainly isn't known exactly today either, sir.
You have 90 seconds to respond.
That's not how the discussion went down in May of 2016. You were caught off guard. You didn't know that if we, either you knew and you didn't want people to know, which is an issue of honesty, or you didn't know, which is an issue of competence. But the fact of the matter is, you have constantly been cheerleading. We need to change the foundation budget, which I agree. But you have to be careful what you ask for, because if we adjust the foundation budget, not only is the state going to be on the hook for more money, but so too is the city. And in your 5-year plan, you don't account for that. You talk about the state. I'm not sure if you actually know that yet. If whatever the state chips in, because of the roughly 50-50 match, so too does the city. You only talk about the city in your 5-year plan giving an extra $1 million, but the state's going to give up to $4 million. That tells me I don't think you really understand how the foundation budget works. And as I said before, you attended less than half of those hearings.
That wraps up the question and answer portion of tonight's debate. It's now time for the closing statements. The candidates will each have 3 minutes to deliver their closing statement. The first will be delivered by Mayor Dumas.
Thank you to the Sun Chronicle, to you, Peter, our moderator, the panelists, and AACS for covering tonight. And again, it's certainly been my honor and privilege to be able to serve you as your mayor. I'm extremely proud of the accomplishments that have been made here in Attleboro and look forward to the opportunity, if given so, to make great strides in the future here in Attleboro. So why another 2 years? First, we must implement the new fiscal stability plan that was recently laid out. It clearly lays out a path forward and for the city's commitment to education, as well as a plan to manage expenses in order to carry out our goals citywide in all departments. Second, we have our next phase of the urban renewal plan planned in the downtown, as I mentioned, half of Union Street up to Park Street Block and the building across from the Sun Chronicle. These areas will be replaced with new opportunities for housing and commercial activity, where we know from proven results that people living in the downtown will use the direct services right in the area or below them. Third, goal of preserving Locust Valley for open space. Once complete, and this would add another at least 100+ acres to the almost 600 acres that is preserved today. This would be one of the largest tracts of land of continuous space in the city and be safe for future generations in perpetuity. Fourth, to see the next phase of the development of the transit-oriented development district along the new Riverfront Drive. And this will be for the new urban village that will be developed in this sector of the downtown. Fifth, to implement our next phases of the sidewalk and roadway rehabilitation program citywide. And sixth, to continue the vigorous rehabilitation of our park and recreational programs that impact all areas of the city. And our next one coming up over the next 2 years would be at the South Attleboro Veterans Memorial Park in Lease Pond. Seventh, the process of implementing a goal of a joint public safety dispatching center for better coverage. And eighth, to create a new tax relief opportunities for our older adult population in preparation for the new Attleboro High School. The city will be at a crossroads in 2018 for the building of a new high school. And I've been the only candidate to fully endorse the plan as developed by the School Building Committee and the Mass School Building Authority. And I remain committed on the project to be able to make this a reality by doing the best we can, certainly to meet the needs of our older adult population, especially on fixed incomes. So on Tuesday, November 7th, as we approach, the voters of Attleboro will decide who their next leader is going to be. And I respectfully ask for your vote of confidence based on proven leadership and the vision of our city. Thank you.
Representative, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Why would you vote for me over the incumbent? That's the question a lot of people are asking themselves. There's a lot of good reasons. Most of them start with relationships. I have an excellent relationship with the Chamber of Commerce. I've got an excellent relationship with the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority. I've got a great relationship with legislators at the State House, with nonprofits throughout the city. That's the way we're going to move this city forward. A lot of the projects that the mayor talked about are projects that I'd be happy to continue on with, just as he continued on with a lot of the projects that Mayor Robbins had started. There's some very specific things we need to tighten up with city governance. We need to put our city checkbook online. That's something we do at the State House, with the Treasurer's Office. We need to see exactly where the money is going. Just because we have a published budget, that doesn't mean we can actually see where the money is being spent or what it's being spent on. Also, I'd like to have a Disability Rights Commission. That's something that we used to have, but we don't have anymore. I also like to, hire, like I was saying before, hire an economic development director. These are all very modest, achievable outcomes that we can, they're measurable. This is all stuff that involves working with people, because that's what government's supposed to be about. It's about the people. It's not about bricks and mortar. Mr. Dumas, Mayor Dumas, when he ran for office, 14 years ago, back in 2003, he was talking about the school. He criticized Judy Robbins, Mayor Robbins, for focusing too much on bricks and mortar. Now I see the same thing happening. All good projects. All projects I'd love to continue on with, just as he continued on with projects started before him. But the element that we're missing is actually working with people. I've got the approval to say what I'm about to say, but when the mayor actually walks by the chair of the ARA in the hallway, he doesn't say hi to him. He's the chairman of the Attleboro Redevelopment Authority. There's no relationship with the Chamber of Commerce other than the occasional ribbon cutting. The Chamber is a great resource. So that's the thing I would like to focus on a lot different. Carry on with a lot of the same projects, as well as, improve the relationships that have been broken. Because, with the Milanowski case, that's just one of many lawsuits that we could talk about that have been broken, that kind of representative of broken relationships. So thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you and best of luck on November 7th. Thank you to our three panelists. Thank you to all of you here at City Hall, the Sun Chronicle, AACS, of course, and those of you watching at home. For those of you who don't know, polls will open at 7 a.m. They will close at 8 p.m. on November 7th. Voters in Ward 1 will cast ballots at the St. Teresa's Parish Center at 18 Baltic Street, Ward 2 at the Good News Chapel at 235 West Street, Ward 3 at the St. John's Catholic Parish Center at 1 St. John Place, Wards 4 and 5 at the La Salette Shrine Welcome Center at 947 Park Street, and Ward 6 at the Elks Lodge at 887 South Main Street. Election results will be announced on AACS. In addition to the position of mayor, the makeup of the City Council and School Committee will also be determined on December 7th, so please take time to go to the polls. Once again, thank you and have a good night.